But yeah, last week, that the webinar we did last week felt a little bit rushed at the end, and so we just wanted to make sure we extended some time to everybody to continue the Q&A and see where the conversation goes. Um, Pretty casual. We don't have anything new to present or anything like that. It's more of hoping to kind of interact with everyone and hear their questions and see what we can do if we can kind of you know, answer some of these things here.
We could just run through common questions in general.
Yeah, so one common question that I saw a lot after was, part of the new features that we showed last week. I'll share my screen to kind of visualize it here. But um, and here. So the dashboard that we showed last week showcases how we can manage multiple accounts. And we kind of talked quickly, and then Marshall would talk quickly about Filevine payments. But the way that we can map multiple QuickBooks bank accounts into the dashboard and then match it to multiple bank accounts in Filevine is through signing up for Filevine payments. So when you sign up for Filevine payments, it allows for oh, it's kicking me out. It essentially allows for settings on inside of each of your billing projects to associate a certain project fund account and a certain invoicing account, Filevine called it, but really it's going to be used as like a general or operating account. And so that's located here. And so some of the questions we got is some people, don't want to use Filevine payments. And I want to make it really clear that you do have to sign up for Filevine payments. It's free to sign up for them, but you do not have to actually use them to facilitate any of your transactions. Signing up for them simply, unlocks this setting where you can then kind of select from multiple accounts. Um, and so, if you're worried about transaction fees or you're using LawPay, because there's certain benefits to LawPay, like passing the fees through the client or something like that. You can continue to use LawPay how you are. Um, we just need these settings enabled essentially. So that was one question I got a few times.
Hey, Zach,
Um,
Zach,
yeah,
one of our clients actually did ask me something yesterday. If you wanted to maybe run through
yeah.
this. So she had asked, she was on the webinar last week and she had asked about partial payments. And it was kind of towards the end. And so she was just asking for, some more clarification when
Okay.
clients do not have a retainer balance, just kind of how to deal with that then, especially in
Yes.
billing cycle.
Yeah. So partial payments without any project funds, is just, um, integration wise, it kind of works the same way. So if I have a $38 invoice outstanding here, right? And if I only received, um, I'm going to not use project funds, but if I only received a portion of that, so maybe 20 bucks of that, I can apply partial payment to this invoice, um, which inside Filevine, my accounts receivable is now reduced to $18. So my AR is kind of accurate in QuickBooks or in Filevine. And then we're still going to push the $20 payment over to QuickBooks and recognize that as income, because it's earned services, cash is in the door. And so we would still push that over into our operating account as income. So here's that $20 coming over in our attorney's fees. Was that kind of the question, Carrie, or was there more to that?
Yeah, I think she was asking more kind of best practice after, like, if we're running the next billing cycle and then there's still a partial payment outstanding on
Oh,
like
okay.
invoice.
Yeah, as far as sending these again.
Hmm.
So one thing you can do, if you want to, like in your next billing cycle, if you want to resend this invoice with the remaining amount kind of shown on that invoice to kind of remind them, you can do that. You can do that here individually. So I can click back in and I can always send by email again. I can also do it in bulk. And so what I might do I might have a quick little process just for my partial payments. So if I go into my bulk billing and invoices, I can filter on that invoice status and I can filter for a list of just my partially paid items. And so this makes it really easy. You can select all and I can send these all out again. And so that, your recipients would receive that email or that invoice via email again, kind of indicating, hey, you still owe some on this invoice. So that works pretty well. You can also, you could send a partial batch and you might also resend invoices that are final or even invoices that were final and sent, just because this status means they still haven't been paid. And so it's safe to send these, a fresh version of these to the client. Um, yeah,
Perfect, thanks.
yeah.
Zach, we have a question. Why would I record payments through Filevine as opposed to QuickBooks?
Yeah, good question. So the reason we're recording payments inside of Filevine instead of QuickBooks is because Filevine is in of itself a billing system. So your entire billing cycle will exist inside of Filevine. And kind of the main reason for that is like your entire legal team is working in Filevine. It's where their case management is. And so as they're working on different cases, they're recording billable time entries, they're recording their flat fees, that's billable, and you're drafting invoices and sending invoices to your clients from Filevine. And so we want to record payments where there's an invoice to apply them to. So we're kind of managing that collections. In kind of the way we integrate of this newer integration feature that we were demonstrating last week. Um, there are not going to be invoices also in QuickBooks. So invoices will just exist in Filevine. And so that's where we record payments. And then further, um, if you do kind of dive into using Filevine payments, which is Filevine's like electronic payment tool, which I could kind of bring up and show you what that might look like. Um, there's two different types of payments through Filevine payments that are targeted, meaning like you can send out an electronic link, and when the customer pays on that link, it can automatically post the payment to Filevine. So there's a lot of efficiency gain there versus kind of looking through your, what hit the bank and then trying to figure out who paid and then apply the payment somewhere in Filevine. Um, and I can show you. So this is kind of our Filevine payment platform. This is where you would go to see all your pending links, all your completed links. If anybody disputed anything, you can filter on your multiple bank accounts, dates, and things like that. Um, but specifically, if we're inside of Filevine, there's two different links that are going to target. And this is kind of what Marshall tried to or was covering last week. And so one, if you're collecting money via Filevine payments into project funds, so into a trust account, and you use, you're inside of that specific case project, and you use this request payment button to facilitate that request. So maybe I want $5,000. I can just email it right from Filevine and they get kind of a generic message, this law firm's requesting money, pay with this link. Or I can copy that link. I can paste it into my own email or my own fee agreement. Um, but when they make payment on this specific link, so if I were to complete this payment, the project fund entry would automatically post here and then automatically post to QuickBooks. So it can be really efficient that way. Um, Another example of that is when we send invoices out from Filevine, they will automatically include a payment link for Filevine. And if your customer uses the link from their invoice message, it will automatically post a payment here. So lots of efficiencies with that side of things too. Um, yeah, if there's no other questions, we could also talk about kind of some plans for finance skills and QuickBooks Connect into 2025. Oh, maybe we got another question.
Yeah. What are the link to pay options? Can they use Zelle or others?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the only kind of native payment link system that's going to be kind of targeted, like I just mentioned, is just going to be Filevine payments. However, we do have customers that embed a generic link from LawPay or Zelle or something else. That you can embed that in either your invoice template, um, or sorry, not either. You can embed that in your invoice template. So what I mean by that is if I go to billing setup and I go to my invoices section, this is my invoice template. And so this is a essentially a Word doc that, or it's essentially a template where you can design the look and feel of your invoice. You can change the letterhead, the color scheme, the font, um, the various kind of items that you want to show up on the invoice. And some of our clients, apologize, I'm kind of losing my voice. Some of our clients embed up kind of a little memo here at the bottom or sometimes up here with a link to like LawPay or another generic link. And so that's kind of an efficient way to get that link out to your clients. You can put it right in their invoice. And that works pretty well, but it won't be targeted. So when they use that link to pay, you'll have to track it into your bank or track it in that system, manually go into Filevine, look for those projects and record the payments. But totally an option.
Do you want to talk about what's coming, what to expect from the integration? I'll interrupt you.
Yeah.
See any more questions come through.
Yeah, for any of those, any folks out there that are already using Filevine, time and billing. One thing that we're working on at Vine Skills and Finance Skills, and Carrie and I are specifically tackling this together, is coming up with 4 standard reports that we launch all of our Filevine firms on that relate to time and billing. And so y'all have maybe noticed like it's not the most intuitive thing to create financial reports out of Filevine. The information is typically it's there somewhere, but the customizing reports is um, not that intuitive right out of the gates. And so we're coming up with kind of 4 really standard best practice reports, one for AR aging, um, one for payment application. So that payment application is the more complex one. A lot of firms use this for compensation, but that would take payments received in a certain period and it would summarize it by essentially which line items on invoices did it hit. So we can summarize how many payments were received by each timekeeper if that's part of a compensation model. We can also summarize payments received against invoice line items if we need to journal that into QuickBooks out of income. So that report's really important and pretty standard. Most firms need that. And so we're trying to come up with like the best version of it that we can then, copy over into each of our clients' Filevine orgs. The third one is billing statements. So you maybe noticed, and we did talk about this, like, right, Carrie mentioned partial payments and we just have to resend the invoice to follow up. We're coming up with a way to in the click of a button, generate billing statements for all of your clients who have overdue balances. And so that statement would be formatted kind of like an invoice, but it would summarize each invoice that is outstanding. And you could put your generic LawPay link in there, or even a Filevine payment link in there, and you could send those out to the clients who have overdue balances. And that gives them the ability to pay not just the amount on each invoice they owe on, but they can just pay one lump sum amount and pay off their total balance. So we're coming up with statements. And then the fourth one is, after working with so many time and billing clients and customizing their invoice templates, is something Carrie's gotten really good at. Um, we're kind of coming up with like a better standard invoice to start with. Like there's some neat features that we feel like most firms would benefit from in that invoice template. One of them being, see, do I still have that up? No. One being contingency tables, for example. And so you notice on the standard template, you've got a timetable, an expense table, and a flat fee table, which is great, but it's kind of sloppy if you don't have any of these, right? If you just bill flat fees and you have 2 empty tables on your invoice, it's kind of sloppy. And so our standard invoice template would have contingent tables, meaning if there were no time entries, this table wouldn't show. If there were no expenses, this table wouldn't show, that kind of thing. So those are kind of the 4 things that we're trying to just kind of build a best practice option for all four of those, share them with all of our clients, and then of course they can be, customized from there, but it's just a better starting point than starting from scratch. Um, let's see. Any other questions trickling in? Nothing yet?
Nothing yet.
Cool. So yeah, so what else is coming with QuickBooks Connect? I did see like there's maybe some people on the call that are in a actually I'm not going to go there quite yet. Some of the features our developers are working on right now, and some of these are already starting to test, is one of them is if I go back to this project, we want to bring in the contingency folks. If you're already using the integration, you're probably familiar with this section. This is where we're syncing total case costs from QuickBooks into Filevine, your trust balance into Filevine, all in real time. And we give your legal team the ability to kind of run their own detail reports. So one thing our team is adding, and we're actively testing this right now, so I expect it to release pretty soon, is the cleared status. So you notice this report has a cleared status. And so basically if you write a bunch of trust checks and your bookkeeper and the QuickBooks side is keeping up with the bank reconciliations and clearing the bank feed, QuickBooks is going to know when these checks clear the bank. And so you'll see a C come through on this report if those checks have cleared. So that can be pretty nice, especially for the contingency firms when you've got, you settle the case, you disperse the funds, the client has questions on their check, or you just want to make sure like, okay, everything's clearing, that can be kind of a common question from the legal staff to the accounting staff. So hopefully we can alleviate some of that by adding that feature. So that's coming soon. Some other exciting features is in our expense request feature, we're going to add classes. And so how this will work is we'll add a QuickBooks class drop-down menu for you. This will be obviously totally custom, and you'll want to make this match your class list in QuickBooks exactly. But essentially, when you select a class, then on an expense request, our systems will look for that. It'll see, is there a matching class in QuickBooks? If there is, we'll hit it. If there's not, we won't. So it is important that this list matches QuickBooks. But that'll be releasing soon. We'll share kind of instructions on how to add that to your expense request section, and Zoe and I can help add it for you as well. But that can be kind of nice to track your case costs at the class level. Another feature in expense request that's going to be coming out soon is mapping expense codes. So a lot of our firms that are doing leads invoicing like insurance defense or some other practice areas that use leads, they requested this. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And so obviously if y'all are familiar with our like a billing item, and billing items have kind of this custom list of codes. So you get to determine what these two lists are in your settings, and you can have two codes on every expense entry that you bill. I believe those do then map to a leads invoice. If you're not using leads invoicing, they're just kind of useful for internal reporting. And so we're adding those to expense request. And so if I were to say, yes, I want to create a billing item, I can now select my billing codes in these dropdowns. And then when our systems draft that expense item, we'll also hit those codes.
Zach, 2 questions
Yeah.
came in. Can you go to the report builder section or
Mm-hmm.
a spot for me? So we have a question. Was a list of available reports on your side built in, or are we left to create the most common billing reports on our own? So when you go to the billing section, by default, before you click anything, everybody will have these options right here under create new reports. You will then, depending on your projects that you have in Filevine, if you select a project type right here, you will then get different options. We have multiple orgs here. You likely only have one, but I also don't recommend having this many project types either. You'll notice that we then get a list option here. List reports, anything that says list of is going to reflect your collection sections in Filevine. Otherwise, any of your plain static project data can be accessed in a list of projects report. They can also be pulled into the collection reports here. But other than that, anything from project fund entries up is going to be standard billing options or standard report options. I apologize. And once you select a project type, anything below that is custom based on your project template. So you have these standard options, and then from there, you can pick and choose what columns you want to add into your report, as well as criteria. I hope that answered your question. Second question here. Yes, we can configure 2 bank accounts, one for cost coming from operating, and then also one for trust disbursements or I guess deposits as well if you're doing time and billing. We currently only can configure to one of each of those, so one operating and then one trust. We are possibly releasing a feature coming soon where we can connect to multiple accounts.
Yeah, was that question was specific to like a contingency settlement?
It doesn't say if it's specific to contingency, but I think it
Okay.
also applies for time and billing as well in those settings, right?
So time and billing settings with the dashboard, we can hit multiple accounts. So you can have as many trust accounts as you need to have. You can have 50, and you can set each project to which trust account is on that project for time and billing, and same with operating accounts. But yeah, then right now for kind of our trust check request, which is more that contingency section, which looks like this. This section is designed to draft your disbursements out of trust on a settlement. So, it's different than time and billing, where time and billing, like everything in project funds or trust, is really coming to the firm when you invoice. Whereas contingency, a lot of that money is going out of the firm. Like some of it you're going to pay yourself, and then some of it you're going to pay the client, you're going to pay medical provider and who else. And so this section, trust check request, kind of facilitates all those distributions. Um, and right now we can only configure this to one default bank account. But yeah, as Zoe mentioned, we're looking at tying it kind of into the dashboard. And so you'd have that multiple bank account setting option. That's something we're looking to do for 2025. On the expense request, sooner than later, our devs are working on this now. Actually, I'll go to this one. They're working on, some of you may know who've been using this a while, that we push check credit cards and bills, and credit cards has to default to one credit card account. Well, many firms have multiple credit cards, which makes sense. And so we're adding a feature where you can have each of your individual cards listed here. And essentially it's playing off the last 4 digits of the card. So mine's 1023. And so if you add a card with 4 digits in it to this drop-down menu, and in your chart of accounts in QuickBooks, you can see my bank account's got 4 digits, and my credit card also has 4 digits, right? So if you're named that account with those same 4 digits, our systems can then hit that specific card when we post it to QuickBooks. So that's going to be a neat feature for firms with a more complex kind of credit card situation going on. To be able to map those in. So that's something Zoe and I will help you kind of add those to your list. We'll also have videos of how you can do this yourself. The nice thing is you don't have to, any of these features we're kind of talking about, you don't have to sign up for them or pay extra for them. They kind of get pushed through, and we share kind of some instructional videos on them, and then we can always meet and walk through them with you.
Any other questions?
I'm just kind of trying to review them here. But yeah, that's kind of what's coming. Some neat additions to expense request. Hopefully showing your cleared status in the QB accounting. Um, so yeah. Any other questions? We do have Matthew in the house. Matthew is our CTO and in charge of the development team. And so if we want to try to stump him with some coding questions, we can. Um, Python, Python questions would be good. See if we can get him stumped. We'll see. Um, cool. Well, maybe that's what we covered today. Um,
Are there any best practices worth sharing? That's a good question, Matthew. Best practices. Generally, so my specialty is PI, contingency firms. Obviously, I dabble also in time and billing when implementing this integration for everybody. Contingency recommendations from me would be on the QB accounting section. Brittany had asked this earlier, but I think she hopped off. The reason for this QB accounting section, she was questioning whether she needed it or not. And I highly recommend at a minimum of using this section for contingency firms. This is going to pull in your total case cost and total trust balance from QuickBooks directly, only associated with this project or customer. So your users in Filevine will not see your whole operating balance or trust account balance for the firm. It's only for this client. And when you go to generate a settlement statement, I recommend using this cost transaction detail report here and attaching it to your statement to send to the client for them to sign off on. It just makes it really, really easy for your accounting team to confirm that it's accurate, and then just easy for users in Filevine to pull this when they need it. As a paralegal, I was waiting a couple days on our in-house accounting team to get us a detailed report when I needed to send a settlement statement. So that's one thing I recommend. Let's see. Also for expenses, we do have, I don't know if everybody has seen, we recommend using Expensify or Ramp or something along those lines. If you have multiple credit cards within the firm, it makes it really, really easy for multiple people to hold their own credit card and then submit a cost report at the end of the month for the accounting team to review. And that feeds into QuickBooks really nicely. And you can also categorize it and associate it in expense. We use Expensify here at Vine Skills, and it just makes it really easy for those credit card charges.
yeah, that's a big one. It essentially like every single charge gets captured and it's put on a report, and that employee whoever the individual who made the charge is then responsible for that report. And so you don't have any of that kind of issue you otherwise would, where it's like, hey, who charged $20 on Wednesday? And everyone's kind of doing that. Nobody knows. And so when you use Expensify, it's like every single charge is assigned to whoever swiped their card. It's put into an expense report, and then it's, full transparency. And so it plays really nicely with the integration, and definitely highly recommend that.
Mm-hmm. And also, when that user is using that, they can quickly log into their Expensify account, attach a receipt of some sort or an invoice that they paid. That just gives clear details of what that charge was for and what it's related to. Another thing is also bill.com. If you use bill.com, it integrates well with your QuickBooks integration. And so if you have a bill that needs to be paid, it can push over and be associated with that client as well.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next, actually, was the expense type bills. We use this for almost all of our bookkeeping clients, because a bill in QuickBooks, unlike a check, a bill can be paid a variety of ways. So in a bill in QuickBooks, you can still, um, I can still print a physical check and I can mark this bill as paid. And so that's what this button would do. This is kind of takes all my bills into the check queue, and I could print a physical check for all of them. Or even better, and this is what we do for a lot of our bookkeeping clients, is we schedule online payment. And so QuickBooks will actually mail a check for you without your account number on it. So it's way safer fraud wise. And you don't have to like put stuff envelopes, get stamps, and all that. And so the way you do that is you'd select the bills you want to pay and you select schedule payments. And this is going to use something called QuickBooks Bill Pay. I guess I selected too many. Um, so this is going to kind of tee up my bills for payment. I have a certain bank account associated with QuickBooks that will pay these bills. And one of the really neat features here is combine multiple bills. And so we see this a lot with personal injury firms or contingency cases where you may have a vendor invoice that's, one invoice, but there's line items for multiple cases on it. And so you could submit a bill from each individual project in Filevine to make sure, okay, this portion of that cost is associated with that case. You can push all those bills as individual bills into QuickBooks, but you can issue one combined payment to the vendor, which makes it a lot easier. And so again, that can be an ACH that QuickBooks sends for you, or QuickBooks can mail a check for you. Um, or you can of course print your own checks. But I definitely recommend exploring having QuickBooks send the money because that kind of saves on a lot of overhead and time. And you can also schedule it. Like QuickBooks can estimate when that money will be received. And so you can schedule it to be received on a due date and not pay early and not pay late, and then just kind of, maximize your cash flow strategy.
And we restrict our users or case managers to only request checks and only cancel, or they will have full access to edit. That's a good question. We get a lot of questions on restricting access or permissions in Filevine. And it wasn't until recently that Filevine released a feature to have protected sections. And what that means is the entire section you can give edit or view access to. And so if you do that and you give somebody view access, they can only take a look at anything inside. They cannot edit. If you give somebody edit access, of course, they can make an entry, change fields, or delete an entry. Well, you have to be a project admin to be able to delete a collection section item. To only push through checks, we can remove options from the drop down. So when you create a new item, how we had check, credit card, bill, and soft cost, we can remove the others and only leave check if that's what you would prefer. Then it would just push over to QuickBooks, go to your print queue as a check, and the status would be pushed back from there. They don't have the option here to cancel or void a check. That would be done directly in QuickBooks, and the status is pulled back into Filevine at the bottom of this section. And one thing that we encounter with those fields is they cannot be manually edited. If so say we push a check here and it pulls back a status down at the bottom. These fields here, so we always have those instructions, do not edit. If these fields are edited, it will break the integration. It's going to, the integration is going to say something's happening that shouldn't be happening. We're going to put a pause on this function and alert our team, our dev team. And then you'll be getting an email from me, or you're going to email me saying things stopped working. And I'm going to ask you, did you manually edit these fields? So two things will happen there. But sometimes we lock these fields if it's requested, if users are just not reading instruction text. We can lock these, which means only a project admin has the ability to edit them. But again, nobody should be editing these. And so in QuickBooks, if this check is voided, it will push back a status of void here. I hope that answered your question.
Actually, this touches on a really good point that we run into with a lot of clients as far as just a training practice to just train people also that once an expense item is created and pushed to QuickBooks, that's a one-time deal basically. Any edits that happen in Filevine need to be reported to the person using QuickBooks so that the same edits could be made in QuickBooks. So just being aware of that is super important for the legal staff.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that's a good point.
And that's another reason too of why I recommend using that transaction detail report in the QB accounting section, because the QuickBooks is your source of truth. And if you have an entry here in the expense request that was voided, it's not going to be zeroed out. It'll still reflect in the total amount of expenses in this section. Whereas in QuickBooks, it'll be voided and not applied. So it just makes it cleaner and
Yeah.
easier to see your total. Are there any other common mistakes or things to know about QuickBooks Connect that are a part of an FAQ or can break the integration?
Yeah, we could talk about the integration user.
Oh yes, that's
That's the
very
most
big
common
one.
one.
Once you are live with the Filevine integration, there are two users that need to have access to the entire org, always as an org admin with edit access, and to each individual project. Those two users will be our Vine Skills user and your Filevine integration user. The reason the Vine Skills user needs access is if something breaks and we receive an error message, and sometimes I can quickly hop in and resolve the issue or investigate and then report back to our dev team before you even notice an issue happened. We get those notifications really, really quickly. If for some reason our Vine Skills user is removed, I am unable to do that. And then you will receive an email from me saying, hey, I can't access this. We received an error. Please add us back with all permissions as an org admin. So we must have access to all projects, must be an org admin in the org at all times. The Filevine integration user, same situation. If that user for some reason is removed from the org or removed at the project level, it will break the integration. Without that integration user, we cannot connect to your Filevine with QuickBooks. So very, very important that both have access to everything at all times.
Yeah, it's I think maybe it's important to point out that you're not being charged for these users. So
Mm-mm.
Filevine knows our email domain, and the integration user is kind of a native Filevine thing, and so they don't. These aren't users they're gonna next year they're gonna add on to your sales order for or anything like that. So I think that's probably why we see people delete them. They want to clean like who are all these users, and they just delete them. But those two are very important.
As well as that lead docket integration, any kind of integration user you
Hmm.
want to remove.
Hmm.
Are there any other things, Zach, that you can think of?
I break the integration. Those are the main ones.
Oh, we receive frequent errors if somebody tries to push through a billing item after the billing cycle is closed. You want to explain that one?
No, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Um, if billing cycle is closed and somebody tries to backdate an entry, it doesn't.
Oh, like if
That error.
QuickBooks is locked?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so inside of QuickBooks, there's the ability to lock a prior period. Um, which mine's loading kind of slow, but it's kind of it's an accounting control. Like maybe you already paid your 2023 taxes. Like in this example, I've locked, selected a closing date as of 12/31/2023 because I don't want anybody to accidentally change my 2023 numbers. My tax people already have them. I've paid taxes. I don't want them to change. And so that can be essentially locked in QuickBooks, and our systems don't override that, and they shouldn't. But that can happen. If somebody had like usually it doesn't happen on expenses, but if you had a bill and you tried to backdate it before 2023, it wouldn't be able to hit QuickBooks. And we're working on kind of ways of alerting you on that in the billing dashboard. So if you record a project fund deposit or if you recorded a payment and it was backdated before that locked period, we do submit it through the dashboard as a for review item. So we won't hit your QuickBooks. We won't break your balances that are already, tied to your taxes. Um, but we will put a for review item in here so your tax people can review that and say, oh, was this a typo? Do I need to open the books and post it? They can make that decision and then they can just clear that off their list. Is that where you're getting at, Zoe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that happens in billing kind of more often than, because expenses are usually like, I've got an expense on today and I'm recording it today, and there's not a lot of backdating, but
Mhm.
yeah, in other areas, sometimes it happens.
One question we get frequently is for firms. I don't know if everybody here, some of our attendees have dropped off, but if you're going live in Filevine and working with an implementation partner to do a migration into Filevine, and you have historical expenses in your previous case management system, we can push those, or they can migrate those into the expense request section. We work closely with all of the implementation partners, and they have access to our sections to have those ready for you. We, by default, generally don't push historical transactions into QuickBooks. Typically you're already live, or the firm is already live and using in QuickBooks, and those expenses already exist there. So pushing them again would just create duplicates. So that's a reason that we don't do that. And generally, if you're migrating into Filevine, we'll do that first and then turn the integration user or process on afterwards. A piece of that is if you're live in QuickBooks already and you have an existing customer list in QuickBooks, and you're also migrating into Filevine, there's a mapping exercise that would generally happen before we can turn the integration on. This goes for both contingency as well as time and billing. The reason is the integration will create a customer based on every active project in Filevine. If you have an active list in QuickBooks, you'll have duplicates and then have to manually merge those after. So either way, there's some manual work. I personally prefer the mapping process. That way you don't have an extended inactive list in QuickBooks. Cool.
Cool. That's almost 50 minutes. We've, yeah, thank you. That, a few of you that joined, glad you're interested. Hopefully this was helpful. And where can we share our scheduling link, Zoe? Just in the normal chat?
Oh, Asia's on it.
Pages on it. So in that Zoom chat, hopefully y'all can see that. You're welcome to schedule a 30-minute meeting with me using that link, and happy to talk through specifically what you got going on, and we can kind of figure out what features of the integration make the most sense for you, or anything finance. We can talk through it. Happy to. So yeah. So thank you all for joining, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Are we sending out a recording of this tomorrow morning?
Yeah, we'll send out a recording.
Cool.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
A happy Friday Eve.
Yeah.
Chat to you soon.
All right. Bye, y'all.